You have to animate every nuance, every breath, every muscle wobble.
Whether it's a DC Comics movie, MCU installment, or Star Wars film, if you look at the behind the scenes of any big budget, major motion picture, you will likely see actors and cameras suspended and precariously placed within a seemingly all-encompassing display of either green or blue screens. My personal favorite is the occasional crew member covered head to toe in a green skin-tight bodysuit.
3, 2, 1, go!
Even most casual viewers are aware of the process of digitally replacing the green or blue sections of recorded images with whatever other material you wish. This is a fairly simple example of the kind of VFX work that goes into creating the elaborate details of fictional worlds and their inhabitants. Nowadays, though, the craft has evolved far beyond just filling in backdrops, with characters being visually constructed entirely through CGI, see Thanos.
The performance is coming through, not only in his gestures and his face, but in his eyes.
However, even with the leaps and bounds technology has made, these digital creations tend to enter a bit into the uncanny valley. Whether it's Thanos' snapping fingers, Superman's demustached upper lip, or the entire last fight scene of Black Panther, motion still seems to be difficult to artificially replicate. Even if you have all the right textures and all the best light and shadow detailing, the actual physical process of something moving still screams manufactured. This may, as all things do, get better with time and perhaps even ultimately be completely ironed out. After all, the process of creating fully CGI characters is relatively new, with the first real example only going back as far as 1985 with young Sherlock Holmes. As for right now, though, filmmakers are increasingly seduced by the novelty of this technology. More and more sets are being constructed in post, with actors having to quite literally imagine the world in their heads as the studios around them are draped wall to wall in either green or blue.
You're just remembering the lines and saying them, really. Or not remembering the lines and trying to say them, as the case may be.
And sure, an actor's job is quite literally to imagine or pretend, but this circumventing of the real and tangible sort of flies in the very face of the art form cinema as a whole. The art of filmmaking, and photography more generally, is literally the act of placing or framing something in front of the camera and capturing its image. If, however, nothing is actually being placed physically in front of said camera, what are we doing? If the finished product is a completely digital landscape, and the characters within the scene can just be scanned, photoshopped, or animated onto the landscape, and this can all be done by a 3D or visual artist, is this still the same medium? No, we have a name for that one. It's animation.
Let it go, let it go.
Audiences have lived our entire lives in the real world, inhabited by real objects and people that take up real 3D space. Most of us can instinctively see the difference between a simulated object and an actual angular creation placed in front of the eye of the camera, at least when motion is involved, which cinema is the business of motion pictures, after all. The marriage of animation and traditional live-action cinema, actually placing something in front of the camera, has led to some of the most stunning and impactful films of all time.
You shall not pass!
I do not mean to, in any way, take away from the art and medium of animation, graphic design, or CGI and visual effects artists. Their inclusion into filmmaking has only broadened its scope, potential, and influence. As a writer, I am even working on developing an animated show myself. However, cinema and filmmaking has always, in part, been about bringing the metaphysical world to the physical one, and capturing and recording the image of an actual, tangible, angular object moving through the spaces of our multi-dimensional reality. One of my favorite examples of this successful marriage between CGI animation and what I call traditional live-action cinematic filmmaking is the lost gem that is the 1987 adventure comedy Inner Space, starring Dennis Quaid and Martin Short. This is a film most people have not seen or even heard of, which is an absolute travesty. I highly recommend. And if my opinion doesn't hold much weight with you, check out Rotten Tomatoes, who has it listed at an 82%. And Rotten Tomatoes goes pretty hard on comedies. This movie's use of practical effects and techniques to depict its otherworldly scenes is absolutely incredible. It follows a man taking part in a top-secret government procedure experimenting with shrinking technology. Once the experiment, surprise, surprise, goes horribly wrong, the shrunken man is accidentally injected into the bloodstream of an innocent bystander, Martin Short. For anybody that remembers the second episode of everybody's favorite cartoon, the OG The Magic School Bus, when the class traveled inside Arnold's body, the rest of this movie basically unfolds as a live-action representation of that.
Jack, are you feeling nervous?
I'm feeling pretty relaxed now, thanks.
A miniaturized Dennis Quaid navigates through the cavernous veins of Martin Short as red blood cells the size of cars go hurtling by. These scenes were made so believable because the production team heavily utilized practical effects. Now, while it is important to note that there were not many other alternative options to make a film like this in 1987, the efficacy of these techniques goes without question, with scenes ending up more convincing than any shot of Iron Man since Iron Man 3. The crew is able to achieve some of these damning results using forced perspective, which is when one manipulates the size or appearance of an object by placing the camera at a specific vantage point. This process can also be seen expertly executed in the classroom scene in the 2003 comedy Elf. The crew for Inner Space also constructed set pieces and raceways, some of which were lined with organic materials such as onions, gourds, and cucumbers in order to resemble the appearance of human organ. These raceways were then filled with water, which the camera would then be submerged in, and specially crafted, transparent, neutrally buoyant blood cells would then be pumped through. A scale model of Dennis Quaid's exploration vehicle would then be pumped through these raceways as well, and the finished product is truly beautiful. The commitment, the ingenuity, this is what filmmaking is about. George Lucas notoriously gave in to the siren call of the green screen with his Star Wars prequels. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. This was particularly heartbreaking from a director whose previous films beautifully depicted alien races and alien worlds through practical costumes, puppets, and effects. Nowadays, the once cutting-edge CGI settings, backgrounds, and scenes all blow their cover whenever someone like Anakin or Obi-Wan goes walking through. They're dated. Some of the scenes from Inner Space, however, things that are real, are timeless. There is a visual disconnect between what is really in the scenes of episodes 1 through 3 of Star Wars and what is not, especially when the two are layered as they were in those films. However, more recent Star Wars projects have fine-tuned this backdropping method.
Real-time render and video wall technology coming together.
The Disney Plus program The Mandalorian once again placed the company at the forefront of cutting-edge filmmaking, just as they were back in 1937 with their use of the multiplane camera for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, perhaps where Disney shines best.
And here now is our same moonlight scene, the way the multiplane camera sees it.
The show utilized a new technique using massive LED screens surrounding a studio stage on which the backgrounds are then displayed. This allows the characters to actually sit in a real-time space with the background's image, as opposed to the image being superimposed later on.
What you see is really what you get. And that's something that really means a lot to filmmakers, especially those who have worked with a more traditional approach in the past.
Furthermore, The Mandalorian brought the use of puppetry back into Star Wars production. The global phenomenon of the obsession over one Grogu or Baby Yoda perfectly showcases the potency of these practical effects. Because we, as the audience, are not eerily unsettled by the uncanny valley-esque nature of simulated movement, we are drawn in by Grogu's adorable nature, endeared by him. His oversized ears even wiggle slightly as his head turns, beady eyes sparkling as they reflect the light of the galaxy's stars. When he moves, it registers as motion. Grogu is real. He actually exists somewhere, and we can feel that. The way in which the world identified and resonated with the green-skinned toddler should not go unnoticed. It speaks to more. Viewers were able to sympathize with him because he registered with them as inhabiting a physical space, as actually existing. Albeit, right now, he's probably just lying lifeless in a storage closet in a studio somewhere under the cape of Pedro Pascal's costume. Werner Herzog made the right call when he told the production crew they were cowards if they made Grogu completely CGI at the start of season 1 of the show. Props such as giant aliens, vehicles, and structures are now also placed on stage in front of the LED background screens, further selling the believability of these scenes. And now other productions are also starting to use this LED technique as opposed to the overplayed green and blue screens.
Drag. Home. Definitely know we can cut to him doing that, we know what's happening.
This is because even Hollywood is starting to remember that nothing beats actually putting something in front of the almighty camera, whether that be an actual alien landscape or at the very least an LED depiction of one. I would also like to end this article by noting that both the aforementioned Elf and The Mandalorian share the same director, Jon Favreau. And though the character Iron Man later went on to become another lifeless CGI entity, the 2008 film Iron Man was deservedly a blockbuster and rightly influenced cinema as a whole with the following MCU.
I am Iron Man.
This was also directed by Mr. Favreau. My point is, Favreau is really making moves when it comes to filmmaking, and is one to keep an eye on. His influence on cinema is already noticeable, and I think we only have more to see from him. And as a fan of both cinema and the man himself, I personally cannot wait.
I think as technology and the economics change, you're seeing television becoming more director-driven.